Dawn came pale and salt-laden, filling the narrow window with a color that was neither the bright blue of the north nor the burning gold of the reach, but the uncertain, milk-thin light that belonged to cities perched on the edge of a hungry sea. Eddard Stark lay awake beneath linens that smelled faintly of lavender and old stone, counting his own breath until he was sure it would be steady when he rose. His knee throbbed with the obstinate ache that had followed him like a loyal hound since the melee in the streets. He set his palms to the bed and forced himself upright, swallowing a groan. No man in this city must see him bow to pain. The chamber around him was not the taller, airier rooms that had belonged to the Hand, with their painted panels and the high, narrow view over the city. Those rooms belonged to another life, another Eddard. These were smaller, nearer the archive and the court. The Red Keep had carved out a cell for its wolf and named it an office. He swung his legs to the floor, feeling the cold of the stone. He had kept his boots near at hand. It eased him to know that if he must move in haste, he could. He dressed without ringing for the boy, fixing the flowing gray of his hair with a plain tie and setting the new chain at his throat. It was lighter than he had feared, yet heavier than it had any right to be. Rings of tin and iron made as scales and scrolls, keys and seals. The Master of Law's chain had been reshaped under 3 kings and 2 usurpers, battered by the same storms that battered men. When he looked at its dark gleam in morning light, he thought of shackles. He crossed to the window and set his hand to the stone sill. The harbor below was waking in fits and shouts, the barking of a dog somewhere unseen, the thwack of oars coming into true rhythm, the call and answer of men who had barely slept and now pretended they had. The Blackwater itself gave back no sound to his eye. It curled along the shore like a thing that had fed well in the night. Across its width, the fog lay low and unbroken. He remembered the smell of the white knife when the ice had begun to break each year. This was nothing like that. This was sour and warmed by too many fires. He stood a long time, letting the coolness against his skin settle him, until it was only the pain in his knee and the weight of iron at his throat that announced themselves. The rest of him was a stillness he was not sure was of his making. Somewhere within the Red Keep a bell began to toll, a soft, restrained peal for prime, a promise to men who swore by such things that the day had begun with order. He pulled on his cloak and went out. 2 gold cloaks straightened as he stepped into the corridor. They had been given him by decree, though Ned had not asked. He could smell stale wine on the one nearest, a wiry man tucked too tight into his armor, eyes that wanted to be everywhere and had already learned to be nowhere. He nodded, and that was all he would give them. They fell in behind him like rain. The corridor led past the alcove where a slender vase of blue glass had been set as a token of civility and taste. Ned could not see such tokens without thinking of what lay behind them. Rooms of men counting things that were never enough. Rooms where food was weighed against loyalty and loyalty against fear. He moved slowly, each step measured, until the corridor widened and the floor began to slope downhill toward the archive. The Red Keep kept its laws like dead kings, in niches and on shelves, bound in leather that had outlived its makers. The clerks were already there when he arrived. They all wore ink on their fingers and the careful, strained politeness of men who had learned to treat words as bricks and mortar. One rose and bowed. He was a clean, precise man with a beard trimmed to a line and eyes that never quite managed to meet Ned's for more than a heartbeat. "My lord," he said, "we have placed the petitions in order of urgency as best we can. There is also a messenger from the Guild of Butchers and a letter from His Grace's Lord Father, sent by His Grace's, his person, meaning the Queen." Ned set his hand upon the stack of parchment and felt the weight of other men's grief. "We see the petitions first," he said. "Then the Guild." "Yes, my lord." The clerk moved, and the others moved with him, the way fish do in a school, as if the water around them had decided to flow one way rather than another. Ned took the first petition and read it standing. Habit from Winterfell, where men were seldom made to wait sitting like children while their lord weighed their lives. It was written with an unskilled hand, but the letters were large and honest. A tanner from the Street of Sisters whose shop had been seized by a captain of the watch in recompense for a fine he swore he had never owed. The exact words of the writ were appended. Ned folded the parchment back and felt heat rise in him that had nothing to do with the weather. "Summon the captain named," he said, "and the tanner himself, if he may be found, and the scribe who wrote this order." The clerks looked at one another, measuring the risk. The clean man bowed. "It will be done, my lord." He moved to the chair behind his table. It was carved in dark wood, shaped in old days as two stags rearing against each other, their antlers tangled. A symbol someone had once thought apartment. The chair did not forgive the back, and Ned was glad of that. He placed the chain upon the plane of wood, the better to remind himself that a thing could lie still and cold and yet decide whether men bled. By the time the tanner and the captain had been fetched, the room was bright with that late morning light that made the dust a pale cloud between one's gaze and the world. The tanner looked smaller without his trade around him. A man of shoulders rope-thick from work and eyes gone thin with fear. The captain wore his authority like a new cloak, not quite cut to him. Janos Slint-Ha. D placed the man in command of the Southgate Watch half a year ago, and Ned had the measure of him in 3 breaths. He would follow orders quickly and make a trade of his discretion. "You stand accused of taking a citizen's shop without court or counsel," Ned said. His voice filled the chamber with nothing but words. "On whose authority did you act?" The captain shifted. His eyes went to Ned's chain as if some answer might be hidden in the links. "My lord," he said, "the order is set down. The man failed to pay the levy. The city must eat." "The levy is a tax," Ned said. "You are not the taxman." The captain's lips made a wet sound. "My lord, the taxman asked us to." "Name him." "Ser Herod of the Coin, my lord." "The scribe who wrote the writ," Ned said. The clerk presented the man. Thin, anxious, hair greased and parted as if fearful of leaving any line uncorrected. Ned read the writ again while the room waited and then handed it back. "This order is irregular and unlawful," he said. "It lacks the chancellor's seal. It names the wrong levy, the one made for bridges in Prince Jaehaerys' day, not the current. And it cites as authority a statute repealed 40 years ago by His Grace Jaehaerys the Conciliator when he rewrote all the law to spare smaller folk from just such depredations." He spoke these latter words more gently than he felt them. He had read the Conciliator's book twice through since they had given him this chair, running his rough thumb across the gloss of the vellum, as if by touching it he could bring the old king near and beg him for counsel. That was a folly old men indulged in. Eddard Stark had earned the right to a few. The captain's mouth opened, closed. The tanner swallowed, and Ned saw the working of his neck. "Do you say the law is a thing we may change at whim?" he asked, facing the captain. "Who taught you to think so?" "The city must be kept," the captain said, finding some refuge. "The Queen has ordered." "The Queen's orders will come to this office if they touch the law," Ned said, and saw a shadow shift behind the man's eyes. "The shop will be returned," he told the tanner, "and the taxman will repay you the goods taken, if he cannot produce the chancellor's seal by tomorrow's noon and nothing less than 2 witnesses from the Bank of the Iron and the Temple. If he cannot, I will have him made to answer before the court, and we shall see how he likes the reading of the Conciliator." It was too mild a justice for some part of him. He knew the weight of a child's body when he lifted it from a river eddy and knew the weight of a law that looked away while small folk were made lean. But he would teach. It was the only kind of victory they allowed him. The clerk scratched the orders. The captain's ears had flamed red. "And you," Ned said to the scribe, "will spend this afternoon in the archive under Maester Miles, copying out the subsections of the Conciliator's book concerning seizure, charge, and levy, and you will sign your name to the bottom and swear you have read them. Send him back tomorrow with the ink still under his nails. If he is not here, send for him." When the men had shuffled out, each altered in some small way by the air of the room, Ned allowed himself to sit back and breathe. Paper was a poor shield and a sharp blade both. A man could be dead behind a desk and not know it. It had been the thought of the morning, returning to him like a sparrow to a narrow sill, peering in with bright, merciless eyes. "If you teach them the book," came a voice from the door, "they will learn to write new books." The words were soft as a sigh, laden with concern that sat as lightly on the speaker as his silk robes did. Lord Varus entered as if the air had invited him. The eunuch's hands were folded, his perfume a cool floral that reminded Ned of rain he had never felt. His eyes, unreadable, took in the room as if measuring it for cloth. And if they write new books, Lord Stark, they will have to choose whose ink they use. Ned did not rise. They were past courtesies, he and this man, though they still wore them. Then let them choose, he said. A good ink does not fear to be poured. Varus' lips made the shape of a smile and then let it go. He drew nearer, stopping at the edge of the table as if the law could stain silk. He lowered his voice, which was already low. There was a small disturbance at the fish market before dawn, he said. Bread, or rather the absence of it, made a sermon no one needed permission to hear. The watch kept their hands on their clubs and away from their swords, as you advised. Still, 2 men have broken noses and a woman has a broken arm. The baker blames a price set yesterday and says that if the price stands, his ovens will go cold and no one will eat. Shall we leave him to learn patience at the mother's altar? Or shall we bring him to your desk and teach him the other's patience? The guild first, Ned said. Then the baker. The guild will learn that if they fix the price so high no one eats, there will be no city to pay it. Varus folded in on himself, pleased. As it happens, the master of the butchers is here, and there is, how do you northerners say it? There is a lead weight hidden under his cloak. Littlefinger would hide it better, Ned said, but he would be sure I saw it. I imagine he meant you to say so, Varus murmured. Shall I show him in? Show him in, Ned said, and allowed himself to think of Baelor's sept, of sunlight on stone and the white, flat glare of the day they had brought him there. The bells had clanged like iron thrown at iron. He had expected heat in that last moment, the heat that comes when the blood knows it is leaving. Instead there had been a coolness, a sudden stillness like a pool when the wind dies. He could still taste it, metal and dust. When the High Septon had raised his hands and spoken, the words had overrun the air with that certainty men who wear crowns always hate. Sanctuary, the old man had said. Sanctuary, or so someone had said. Sometimes the memory blurred and he heard Cersei's voice under the words, hard as glass worn smooth by a river. Joffrey had smiled. The thin smile boys wear when they are made to swallow medicine before company, and the sword had not fallen. Varys had been at his shoulder that day, too. He wondered if the man had been praying. The master of the butchers filled the doorway as if he had brought his own door with him. He was a thick fellow with forearms like hemhocks and a beard in which breadcrumbs had built a city of their own. Behind him walked a boy narrow as a drawn knife, eyes darting. The butchers bowed, an act they performed as if measuring a pig. How much must be cut away for service? Their master cleared his throat with a noise like a cart over cobbles. My lord, he said, the guild asks for relief. We cannot buy at the old rate and eat at the old rate and sell at the old rate. Your pardons, but we are not magicians. Nor thieves, Ned said. I trust you mean to say you are not thieves. The man's eyes widened in good-humored outrage. By the stranger's hollow face, no. We feed the city, my lord. When we cheat, it is at our own expense. You have raised the price twice in 12 days, Ned said. You cite the king's coinage being clipped. You cite the Reach's ships riding out of Lannisport and not into our harbor. You cite every wind that blows from west to east. So bring me your books. He tapped a finger on the table. If your margins are as thin as your pity for those who eat, we will see it. The master blinked. Men like him were used to lords who either shouted or joked. Neither served a ledger. My lord, he began. Your books? Ned said again, and the boy behind the man stepped forward with a wrapped bundle in his hands. He set it down with reverence as one might lay down a child. Ned unwrapped it and saw what he had expected. Numbers done with care, with a grudging love, even the way a man who works in blood might love figures for the way they kept his hands clean. He ran a finger down columns. Listening to the numbers speak the truth, they were happy to share with those who spoke their language. Very well, he said after a time. You will not fix the price. You will post the day's price at the gates and on the bell towers as you used to in the reign of Jaehaerys. and you will sell at that price until sundown. If a man buys more than a family can eat in 2 days, you will send him away and mark his face in your book and on the door where men can see it. If a baker or a barkeep comes with a note from his trade, you will sell to him enough to feed those who come to his table. If you find a butcher cheating those whose names are not worth remembering, you will bring me his name and books, and I will see them read in the king's courtyard with the names of the dead he has made scribbled in the margins. Do you understand me? The butcher's master listened. Frowning so deeply Ned half expected his brow to make a new crease and pour out wine. The man glanced at Varys as if seeking the softness he knew he would not find in Ned. Varys' face was made of air. "My lord," the butcher said, "we can try it." "You will do it," Ned said. "And if it fails, we will try something else. The law is not a club. It is not a finger wagged in a face. It is a wall built against what men would take from each other if they could. I will build as many walls as I need to." When they had gone, their relief trailing after them like smoke, Varys let his breath out through his nose. "You have a way," he said, "of making the wall very high and the door always just within reach. They will forgive you in time for making them climb." "I am not here for their forgiveness," Ned said. "I am here because the boy on the throne has no patience for walls and his mother is tired of replacing windows. Which is to say," he added, "I am here because the city stands on mud and no one wants to see their boots sink." Varys steepled his fingers. "And yet you build." "I do," Ned said, and reached for the next petition. By midday he had sent a thief to the wall in mercy and a murderer to the headsman because mercy is not a word for all men. He had fined 2 gold cloaks a month's pay for beating a man whose crime had been to look them in their tired, hateful eyes and not look away. He had ordered a fishmonger's stall returned with apologies to a widow who knew how to count her own change and who had stopped hiding her book of tallies since she learned that, at this table at least, she could say the word book without someone smirking. He had made 3 mistakes he could feel like sand in his teeth. That was good. The day was not honest unless it left a bitterness that required rinsing. When he rose to go to the council chamber, the pain in his knee had sharpened to an iron point, but his breath was steady. Sansa waited to walk with him. She stood just beyond the archives door with her hands folded the way her mother had taught her, and when she saw him she made that little movement he would have known if he had woken after 1,000 years. A dip of the chin, quick as a bird's, meant to say "I am well" in a way that begged him to ask anyway. Her hair was arranged in coils that had taken someone clever an hour or more to make. They reminded him of the way river eels twist around a creel. "Father," she said, taking his arm. He let her, though pride nagged at him. She had grown 3 inches since they came south and learned to walk as if she were gliding over ice she did not quite trust. "You look tired." "So do you," he said. "The city keeps poor hours." She made a face, the same when she was small she had made at the taste of strong beer. "They were singeing a boar in the courtyard last night," she said, "for a feast in 3 days' time, to mark the king's name day." She did not say Joffrey's name at first, and when she remembered to say his grace she wore the word like a ring too tight for her finger. The smoke came up and went into the rooms. It smells fine when it first rises, and then it feels as if one has eaten the ashes. He could smell it too, though faintly now. The court had learned to celebrate without joy. Smoke at least gave a man something to breathe. "The king likes his feasts," he said, because it was a sentence that did not threaten to break anything. "His grace likes to watch the men fight over the bones," Sansa said softly. Her grip on his arm tightened, then loosened in apology. The gold cloaks behind them fell into step. It had taken them months to learn to be silent around her. She had made them as silent as men whose teeth ache and must not be seen to hurt. "You will keep your courtesy," he said. The words had become their work, he and she, shaping them into something that could be set between them and the day like a plank over a chasm. "Courtesy costs nothing and buys more than famine bread. If you must spend it, I will help you win it back." She nodded. Her eyes were her mother's today, watchful and full of a bright determination that would have been mistaken, in a softer woman, for hope. "I have started a ledger," she said, surprising him, "for the kitchens. Lady Tanda, who oversees the pantry, does not keep good accounts. I think I can make the grain go farther if they stop chasing the mice and face them instead." Ned could not stop a small sound in his throat. "A ledger," he said. "It is not so difficult," she said. "The numbers have a way of lining themselves up if you let them. Arya would have had them running wild and strong. I think I can make them stay in rows." He bent his head. Arya ran across the thought like a brook one does not mean to step into and finds very cold. "It is good," he said. "Bring me this ledger when you are done. We will see if we can make it stronger." She did not say, "I will show it to the queen," and he was proud of her for that. They reached the council chamber, and the two men at the door crossed their halberds and lifted them in the same motion that had been taught to them by a man who believed music could be made in a world like theirs. Inside, the room was cool and large, its windows set to look down and out upon the city. On purpose, Ned thought, on purpose. The small council met beneath stained glass of 7 colors that did not stop the light so much as slow it and decide what stories it would bring with it. Cersei sat where Robert had once sprawled, wooden and stiff-backed, her hair coiled and pinned as if her skull needed metal to keep it whole. Her green eyes moved to Ned and then away again, the way a cat's do when it cannot decide whether the thing before it is prey worth the hunt. Littlefinger lounged as if there had been pillows made from other men's trust beneath him. Pycelle was already in the act of falling to sleep, and had been so since the spring of years Ned had not been here to judge. Varys took his place with a small sorrow as if he had been late to a funeral. 2 new men had taken chairs at the far end. A narrow-shouldered scribe from the king's chamber and a captain of the port whose hands dreamed of rope even when he sat. "My lords," Cersei said, "and Lord Stark." She did not say but let the title lie like a blade before him that he might not pick it up. "Bread, fish, ships, and those ridiculous lanterns the High Septon insists on lighting every evening, as if prayer asking for light were not the best joke the gods ever played upon us. We will begin." Littlefinger smiled, lazy and heated as a cat in a sun patch. "We are agreed, then, my queen, that the gods have a sense of humor." "If they do," Ned said, "it is not one that makes their priests laugh." Cersei's gaze snapped back to him, and he saw the lines at the corner of her eyes harden. "Let us save the priests for last," she said. "They are worst when we speak of them early." They spoke of ships. The port captain reported that Lannisport's traffic had become a mirror that showed kings landing only its own gaunt face. The Tyrell's captains had taken their sailcloth and their peaches and gone home until they could be sure that the coin that paid for crew would still be worth meat in their bowl. The city's fishermen were bringing back nets heavy with nothing. Ned thought of gnats over still water, of brief lives lived in great numbers and no witness taken. He set his fingers on the table and let the reports wash over him until they made a rhythm he could hear. When Littlefinger spoke, the room listened as if gold coins had begun to fall on the floor. He was careful to send them nowhere and everywhere. "We have coin enough to buy grain for 2 months, he said. "If we close our eyes to the king's shield factories for that long and pray that our neighbors do not notice us pushing our fingers under the doors while the hinges are still warm. After that we must either borrow or take, and the last men we borrowed from have begun to walk wearing swords at their hips. It does not make for a restful sleep." "We will not borrow more," Cersei said. "Borrowing is for weaker men than my son." "Then we take," Littlefinger said, smiling, "and later we forgive ourselves for having taken." "The city will not forgive," Varys murmured. "The city will forgive the hand that feeds it," Cersei snapped. "They will forgive a boot if it stands between them and the dark." "You mistake them," Ned said. "The city will forgive a boot if the man in it walks with the same step it walks, and if he takes it off when he enters houses that are not his. If he does not, they will bite the leather until it is rag." "You would feed them your honor if you thought it would make the stew go farther," Cersei said. "A wolf should know the taste of blood." "A wolf knows the taste of winter," Ned said. He did not look at her when he said it. He looked at the glass in the windows and the way the light fell through the green lit the veins in the stone the color of old bruises. They spoke then of the faith. The High Septon had sent a gentle, inflexible letter asking again that the king attend evening prayers on his name day. There would be a procession with candles and with bread carried high on platters, an old rite of asking for abundance from gods who never carried bread themselves. Joffrey had answered by sending back a knife with a note pinned to it. He would attend if he were guaranteed the bread was not for peasants. The knife had not been clean. Varys had not let the note be read in the council all at once, but had given it to each of them in turn and taken it back afterward, as if the paper might bruise. "Your son must not send knives to holy men," Pycelle rumbled, a lion's purr becoming a cough of bones dry in a sack. "My son," Cersei said, and the words were a wall built round a garden where no plants grew anymore. "My son will send what he likes to men, who wear better linen than any of us and have the leisure to pretend to care about the hungry while they grow fat on tithes." She paused. "We will send bread to the temple anyway, as a gift from his kindness." Ned said, "We will send flour to the bakers and make bread in the lower kitchens and take it to the alleys where the temple does not walk." He turned his gaze to Littlefinger. "We will buy grain from the Stormlands." "Our friends in the Stormlands," Littlefinger said, eyebrows up, as if he had not thought Ned had friends anywhere he could not throw coin. "Ser Davos is said to carry for Stannis," the port captain muttered, and then colored for speaking without being asked. Varys' head turned very slightly and then did not. "The Stormlands have rain the Reach did not," Ned said. He had learned more of rain these last months than in all the years snow had educated him. "If we pay fair and the King's seal is on the writ, even Stannis Baratheon will sell to us. He is not a man to let children starve in a dispute where the matter at hand is pride. Stannis would sell us his own fingers if he could write his name with the blood he made," Cersei said. "It will be done. Littlefinger, see to it. If you cannot find ships of our own that can outsail gossip, hire men who can, and ensure they do not steal more than half." Littlefinger's smile did not change. "I always tell a thief what part of me I wish to keep. And you trust him to take only the rest?" Varys asked, a note in his voice that was almost admiration. "No," Littlefinger said lightly, "but I trust him to leave me wanting to hire him again." They did not touch the true edge of the matter until the shadows from the colored glass had shifted across the table, so that all the faces had something on their foreheads that might have been a blessing or a stain. Then Cersei said, without preface, "There will be talk of it today, of the Tower. It is as well if we say something before the talk grows bored and becomes inventive." "The Tower?" Pycelle said, as if the word were a swallow that had flown into his mouth and needed coaxing to come out again. "The Tower of the Hand," Cersei said, eyes on Ned. "We will have it closed." It surprised him to find that the words still had enough iron in them to strike sparks against bone. He had not been in those rooms since the day he had been told he would not lose his head but would wear a chain. He had not wanted to see whether the rugs remembered his feet. "As you wish," he said. "It is not my place." "You mistake me," she said, teeth nearly showing. "We will have it closed to the court. We will open it to the city. Clinic. There will be beds and a place for washing. The Queen's charity will be spoken of as something done with water and cloth and quiet." He looked at her and wished he did not understand her at once. It would have been safer to be slow. "It will be a cage with wide bars," he said. "You will keep them in sight while you decide whether seeing them pleases you. Do you disapprove?" she asked sweetly. "Is it not the wish of every stubborn northerner to see the rich give their beds to the poor? I have slept on floors more soft than some beds," he said. "If the rooms open and men come to wash, I will not call that evil. If the Queen's name is said while they wash, I will not call it good. Then we agree I can do as I like," she said, and rose before anyone else could do so. "The council is adjourned." She left them there with the stale smoke and the colored light and the knowledge that each of them was a soldier in an army that marched without drums. Littlefinger drifted toward Varys, smiling and hissing like water poured slowly on a hot pan. Pycelle fell into one of his feigned naps that were becoming less feigned as the year turned. Ned stood very still, not moving until the stewards began to set the room in order for the next meeting that would say nothing and yet not be a waste of breath. He found Sansa waiting in the corridor. She had not entered. It was not a room for her yet. Her eyes searched his face. He shook his head slightly. "Come," he said. "Walk a little." They went down into the lower ward where the air was thick as cloth and smelled of old fruit and damp. Sansa walked carefully, but she watched everything. The way a washerwoman's line dipped in the middle when a shirt heavier with patches was hung. The way a boy carrying a bucket did not spill because he had learned to set his feet first and then his eyes. Ned saw the city again through her and almost forgave it. They passed a niche where someone had left a sprig of mint in a chipped cup. The leaves were crisp and fragrant in the dim. Sansa reached without thinking and touched them, then drew her hand back, guilty. "I only wanted the smell," she said. He smiled. "Smell as you like. Our life is not so rich we must fear to steal a scent." She breathed and wiped her finger unthinkingly on the inside of her sleeve the way Catelyn used to do with pine resin. When they climbed in the Godswood. He swallowed and fixed the memory in place so it would not turn cruel later. "My lady," said a thin voice behind them. They turned. A boy stood there with hair that had not been cut by anyone who knew how to use shears, holding his cap in both hands so hard the horsehair in it threatened to split. He looked at Sansa as if seeing a high window that had no glass. "My mother says if it pleases you to come have a sip of water in our room, it would be our honor," he said, and looked as if he might faint from the brashness of his own words. Sansa glanced at Ned, a question entirely in her eyes. Ned considered. The gold cloaks shifted nervously. "If we go," he said, "we go quickly." The boy's face flame brightened. He led them through a door and down a passage that tightened so quickly the gold cloaks choked it. Ned left two at the door and went in with Sansa and the boy. The room had no window. It was clean in the careful way the poor clean things, with water made with patience, with a cloth washed thin, with pride as a broom. The woman within was younger than Ned had expected, and older too, the way someone who had learned to count years by children's fevers and the months between wages will be. She curtsied. "My lord," she said to Ned, then looked at Sansa and swallowed. "My lady, water is not beer, but it is cold, and cold is pleasant as virtue." Sansa smiled in the way she had learned that made people trust they had done something right. Her courtesy did not cost her nothing. He was proud of her again. She took the cup and drank and handed it back with both hands and praised the cup itself for being smooth and not chipped, though Ned had seen the flaw. The woman's eyes filled and emptied. When they came away, the gold cloaks fell in and could not hide their disapproval. Ned stood in the narrow streak of light from the door and let them catch the look in his face. "You will not tell other mouths where this one is," he said to the one with wine on his breath. The man flushed and looked away. Ned nodded once and limped on. The knee complained. He did not listen. He spent the afternoon in the Hall of Justice because a man should sometimes suffer the sound of his own work as it enters the world and becomes noise. The hall had been newly whitewashed until it looked like the belly of a great fish turned to a pitiless sky. The benches were full of men whose lives had taken a left turn and not quite turned back. Ned sat on the dais under a canopy that would not keep the rain off if it came. He listened to the pleas and the accusations, and when he spoke he thought of walls. He thought of Jory Castle and of Howland Reed and of the boys whose faces he could not put away, and he let the thought sharpen his words without making them bloody. A boy was brought before him for stealing bread. The baker swore it 3 times, and each time he swore it his fists clenched. The boy looked at the floor as if names could be counted there. Ned gestured the baker nearer and asked him in a voice low enough to be love, "If I had given you 3 coppers for this loaf to pay for the flour and the heat and your time, would you sell it?" The baker nodded, suspicious. "You have your 3 coppers, he said to the captain of the guard. "They will come from the master of coin if he protests we have none. The boy will carry wood to the oven for 6 days, 4 for the law he bent and 2 as a gift to you because men with ovens should remember being small. If he comes late, he will spend a day in the jail being taught the parts of the wheel. When he has done, if he comes again to your shop, you will not chase him." The baker stared at him a long time, and then nodded again, slower, as if counting it. The boy looked up and never smiled, and that was right, for that was not what this had been. When the day's light had been beaten thin and the words were exhausted, he sent all men away and sat in the hall alone. A fly walked across the wood of the desk, ran its legs together as if washing his words from itself. He watched it and breathed. "My lord," said a voice from the shadow. Ser Barristan Selmy stood there, ghost pale in the last light, armor silent as a witness. He had grown thinner in the city's hunger and more beautiful, like a statue that had endured the sea. He bowed his head. "There is a man in the jails who says he has a name for you. He says you will know the name and that it will mean something. My pardons, I am not a courtsman." "You are better," Ned said and rose. The pain in the knee flared like a coal being teased to life. He took up his cloak and followed the Lord Commander out. The jails were colder than the hall, though they were deeper, and there was a damp that ate the edges of things. The jailer took one look at Barristan and did not make pretense of asking for a coin. The man they wanted was kept not too far in, because men who would speak should be kept where the air still had learning in it. He sat on the straw with his back to the wall and his head canted to one side as if listening for a sound only he knew. When he saw Ned, he did not get up. He looked at the chain around Ned's throat and laughed once so softly even men who loved to hear their own laughter might have missed it. "My Lord Stark," he said, "if I still may call you that." "You may call me anything your tongue remembers," Ned said. "It will not change the name I answer to." The man had a face that had been made handsomer by deprivation. Cheekbones showing where fat had fled, eyes too bright. His hair was the color of a plank that has been under water and then dried. "I was apprenticed to a blacksmith," he said. "I made nails until I could make them laugh. Then I made horseshoes until a mare kicked me and took my courage with her hoof. Then I made knives until a man who needed a knife made me uneasy and I asked him what for and he asked me would I like to find out. So I ran. You know how men run in this city? They run in circles." He pointed at the straw. "Here I am at the other end of my circle. There was a boy running in his circle the day the prince rode out with his friend." Ned felt something then. Not dread, which was flat and tasted of iron, but a thinner thing, a thread at the back of the mouth. "Go on," he said. "The boy had a helm with bull's horns," the man said softly, "and the prince's friend did not like him wearing it. So they frightened him and broke his things. Another boy, another one, tried to help and ran. Later the one with the horns had his throat cut by a man with hands like a butcher but not as skilled." The man smiled and showed gray teeth. "But that isn't what I came for," he said. "I came because a man who sells fish on a cart by the Street of Flowers says there is a boy at Tobo Mott's forge who ought to be safe and isn't. He has a face like someone men would recognize if they had known him when he was a man, only smaller. You have a face men would recognize if they had known you when you were a boy. We are all circles," he added kindly, as if it were a lesson. Ned stood very still. The cold in the jail seemed to go through him and find the places where he still had heat and sit there, delighted. "What is the boy's name?" he said. He already knew the answer. He was a man of law now. He asked to hear a thing said before he made it so. "He doesn't know," the man said, amused. "But he looks like someone whose name you know. He looks like a man who once wore a king's body like a shirt." Ned's breath was very slow. He thought of Jon Snow, of his black hair and blacker eyes and the way a boy raised by someone who never lied learns to lie in ways that leave him broken. He thought of Robert Baratheon laughing with his mouth full and blood on his beard. He thought of a boy with black hair he had noticed in Tobo Mott's forge weeks ago. A boy with shoulders that would be broad if he were fed. A boy who had been a face in a world full of faces and had slid by him without a word. His body felt heavier. "Thank you," he said to the man. The man leaned his head back against the wall and closed his eyes. "I did not do it for thanks," he said. "You will see me sent somewhere, yes? Not down, not under. I am sick of walking in a circle." Ned looked at Barristan. The knight did not speak. He inclined his head and then straightened. "He will go to the wall," Ned said. "If he will go, I will go," the man said simply. "I am sick of the taste of the air here." He opened his eyes and looked at Ned's chain. "Do they let you take that off when you sleep?" "No," Ned said. and left him to his straw and the thought of a road that began with boards under a man's boots and ended with boards under his feet again. The forge was a pocket of clean heat in a city that had learned to be warm in all the wrong places. Tobomot greeted him with the courtesy due to the one man in the city who might save you or ruin you and who would try to do neither. The boy was at the back, hauling a bar from the coals with the awkward strength of youths whose bones are deciding whether they are a blessing. He looked up, and there was a darkness in him that matched a darkness Ned had known all his life and had chosen to pretend was the shade of a tree. "What is your name?" Ned asked, though he already felt the answer uncoil. The boy shrugged, light on his feet in a way that would have embarrassed Sansa if she had seen it. "Hot Pie calls me Bullhead," he said. He had a voice like a road, rutted and stubborn. "The master calls me Boy. I used to have another name. I do not say it to men who might sell my tongue after they cut it." Ned let the smile that he did not feel touch his mouth. "You have a face that would earn you coin in the wrong tavern," he said. The boy's eyes went colder. "There are men who would dress you up as a ghost and charge men to see a dead thing. That is a wicked game. I would rather you were set to a game that ends with your hands stained only with honest soot." He stepped a little nearer and saw the flinch the boy could not help. He resisted what he wanted to say and chose what he had learned to say. "Do you wish to be safe?" "I wish for a horse that eats air and pisses gold," the boy said. "I will take safety instead if it is cheaper." "You will come to the castle," Ned said. "There is work there. If you bring your tools, no one will think you have value beyond what you make. It is not perfect safety. We have none of that, but it will do." He saw the boy consider the iron in Ned's voice rather than the promise in it. He nodded once. When he left the forge, the sky had turned the dirty blue of dusk over a city that feared the night and yet loved it. Sansa waited under the arch of the postern with a basket hanging from her arm. The basket was too heavy for a lady to carry, and so she had chosen to be a girl instead. She lifted it and he took it, and they went together to the kitchens. They moved through the steam and the shouts and the private little oaths cooks keep for themselves. And Sansa set her ledger on a corner near a pot where someone had learned how not to burn beans. She opened it and showed him the numbers, neat as pins. He saw the places where she had achieved more grain than was there by the simple magic of not letting someone slip it into their sleeve. He saw the places where she had made the daily hurt of cooking for a room full of men who do not say thank you into a set of columns. He felt something soften inside him that had been armor and that now might be a garment made for winter. He set his hand on the page briefly and then took it away. "Good," he said. She glowed in a way that had nothing to do with light. "The master of kitchens says I am tiresome, but I think he means I am right." She paused. "I do not think I like being right. I think I like being seen to be right. I do not know if that is worse." "It is human," he said, "and humans have lived through worse than truth." They walked back out into the night. The lanterns were already being lit along the Lion's Way. The smell of tallow and smoke lay under the sharper smells of fish and sweat and the iron of blood from the day's butcherings. The wind off the Blackwater tasted of rope and rust. Ned could feel the city settling, the way a great beast settles, reluctant, with many breaths taken before stillness. His knee ached and he put his hand to the stone for a moment to steady himself. Sansa did not speak of it. He loved her for this and for 2,000 other things. In his chamber, after he had sent her to her rooms with 2 of his quietest men, he unfastened the chain and set it on the table. Then, because he was not a fool, he set it on the chest beside his bed where his hand would find it if the air came alive. He took out a letter half-written and read what he had written with the clarity of a man looking at the tracks of his own feet in fresh snow. He had written a letter to Robb that said nothing that would break a law or a peace and everything that needed saying. He told him of ledgers and bread and a boy he had brought into the castle's shadow because the world eats boys the way rivers eat banks. He told him of Sansa's numbers and the way Cersei watched windows. He did not write of the day at the September. He had promised Catelyn he would bear that alone so that she could bear all the other things. He dipped his pen and set it to the page and found that his hand had begun to shake. He did not hide it. There was no one to hide it from but himself. He slept sitting up without meaning to, and dreamed of Winterfell as it had been before he knew what cities were like. He dreamed of the Godswood and the cold bite of air that made lungs ache and feel grateful. He dreamed that a boy with dark hair crouched by the pool and put his hand in the water and watched the ripples make his face a stranger's face and laughed softly as if accepting an apology from the world. When he woke, his knee had become a fist. He stood and paced the length of the room until the pain became a thread he could tug without being made mad. He set the chain back around his neck. Cool metal, skin warmed by a night made of the breath of many other men sleeping and not sleeping all over the city. He wanted to go to the Godswood of the Red Keep, such as it was, and stand beneath its pale face. The heart tree there was a sickly thing, transplanted from somewhere that had not wanted to let it go. It made him both angrier and calmer than anything else in the south. He did not go. The morning was already busy. He had allowed the law to set the day the afternoon before. Now he would let it set him. He was not halfway down the corridor when he heard voices in a room where the air had not been told it was day. He stepped into the doorway without announcing himself and saw that he had walked into a holdfast he had not known the keep possessed. A place where the watch practiced lying to one another by way of words. Janos Slynt was there with two of his captains and with Littlefinger, who had likely been passing and had stopped because he loved the smell of ambition. They rose a heartbeat too late. "You look very well, Lord Stark," Janos said, smiling as a man smiles when he has just thought of a way to put a fence on another man's land. "Spring agrees with you. Spring agrees with anyone who has lived long enough to see it," Ned said. "Captain Slynt, a word." He did not ask Littlefinger to leave. He knew requests he was not prepared to make laws of made him smaller. They stepped aside into a corner that had heard men decide unkind things. Ned said, "You will disband the market company tonight. They will return to their barracks and be reassigned. They have been making bargains with their batons and I will not have it." Janos' smile widened in disbelief and then narrowed to annoyance. "My lord," he said, "the market company keeps the markets clean of dirt. If you disband them, the dirt returns." "Dirt can be swept," Ned said. "Mud can be shoveled. Men who eat other men's suppers because they wear a cloth on their shoulders with a lion's head on it are not dirt. They are rot. I will not have rot." "What will you have?" Janos asked, and there it was, the frankness that came when a man thought he had found a place where frankness could be cheap. "The city will not be kept by the sweet cough of priests and the coughs of tired old men like Pycelle. Will you walk every stall and count the peaches?" "If I must," Ned said and saw the captain blink. "If I must, I will count every peach in this city, and it will not make me less of a lord to know the shape of a fruit." He had the urge, childish and savage, to set his hand on Janos' chest and push him until he stumbled and knew what it was to catch himself on the edge of dignity. He did not. He said, "Disband them." Janos inclined his head. There was no courtesy in it. "As you say, my lord. And when the markets come to us to complain that the rats have learned to say thank you before they steal, I will send them to your door." He paused, enjoying something. "The queen will not like this. She likes the markets quiet." "She likes all things quiet," Ned said, "except the boy, and the boy should not be quiet this year. It will be many years before he is quiet, if he is fortunate." He stepped away and saw Littlefinger watching, eyes half-lidded with the pleasure of other men's friction. "Will you be at the Queen's supper tonight, Ned?" Littlefinger asked, and turned the name into an intimacy he had not earned. "If I am invited," Ned said. "Oh, you are invited," Littlefinger said pleasantly. "We are all invited to the Queen's table. Some of us for food. Some of us for the surprise in the cake." Ned left him to his metaphors. The day unfolded itself like a map that had been folded too many times and now refused to lay flat. He saw the butcher's boy from the Hall CA, ryeing wood to the baker's oven and looking at the flames with the wonder of a child who had learned that there are fires that do not burn things one loves. He saw the tanner back in his shop, the scent of boiled leather soaked into stones so deeply that when the building fell someday men would still smell it. He saw the scribe with ink on his fingers, miserable and proud of it. He sent the letter to Robb. He sent another to the Eyrie that said nothing that would do harm and everything that needed to be said, and he wondered if it would find Caitlin or if it would sit in a basket while a gull hopped across it with sea-wet feet. At dusk, before the supper, he went at last to the Godswood. He went alone because some things required it. The tree there was thin, its face carved by a southern hand that had made the eyes large in hopes of finding in them a depth it did not believe in. He stood beneath it and set his palm to its strange bark. He did not pray exactly. He remembered. He remembered his father and his brother and the sound that a rope makes when it is asked to be a thing it is not. He remembered Lyanna and the way a promise can be a door that opens only onto other promises and never onto a field. He remembered the sept and the way a day can tilt and everyone keeps walking as if the floor were level. He remembered Sansa's numbers, and the boy in the forge, and the butcher's boy, and the baker, and how this city needed 1,000 small, blunt mercies as a body needs breaths. When he left the Godswood, the air had cooled. He found Sansa waiting in the corridor outside the Queen's Hall, her hair newly coiled, her gown plain and white and clean. She set her hand upon his arm, and they went into the room where men spoke loudly to keep from hearing themselves. Cersei's eyes found him and slid away. Joffrey sat thin and gold and sharp as a blade that will cut its owner. He did not look at Ned. Ned did not mind it and did not trust it. They ate. The meat was tender and the bread was too fine for its flour and the wine was thin and trying to be brave. Men laughed and the sound jumped around the room like a hare that had not yet understood it was to be lunch. When the singers came, they sang of heroes out of books and of villains out of doors. Sansa watched them with eyes that had learned to weep without tears. Joffrey watched them with the hunger of a boy who thinks he can eat everything and finds himself, daily, still hungry. The Queen watched everyone. Ned ate the bread and thought of the lower kitchens. He drank the wine and thought of a river he had once fallen into at 12 and of the way the cold had made him love his own skin. He spoke when he was required to speak and he made his words sturdy. They were not made to win favor. They were made to bear weight. After supper, when the Queen had dispensed a smile like coin and the courtiers had caught it, he left the hall with Sansa and returned to the offices that had been his first mantling of the day. There was a candle still lit there on his table, though he had not left one. On the candle's base lay a folded scrap without a seal. It told him that she had forgiven him for something he had not confessed and that she would not forgive him for something he did not yet know he would do. It told him to keep Sansa's hands busy with good work and not to let her sing murder songs. It told him to feel the cold when it came and to call it by its name. He set the note down. Sansa stood very still, watching him. He told her only that her mother had written and was safe enough to write. He did not tell her about the boy or the river or the word forgive. He would leave room for tomorrow to say some things and for the day after to take some of them back. He went to the window and opened it. The smell of the city rose toward him like a thing he had asked for and did not want. He let it fill the room and then he closed the shutters. He sat. He set the chain on the table where he could look at it and remember that even if a thing did not move, it could move other things. He picked up a pen. He began to write, slow and careful, as if each word were a brick and he were laying it into a wall whose height he could not yet see. He did not hurry. He let the ink dry between sentences, and while it dried, he listened. To the city settling, to footsteps beyond the door, to the sound of his own breath. Steady, slow, as a man breathes who knows that the hardest work is done with patience and the best wars are lost by men who cannot carry a day to its close without spilling it. A knock came, without the nervous rhythm of a steward or the swagger of a guard. He looked up. Varys slipped inside and closed the door behind him with fingers that could, if they had to, strangle a lie before it reached its second word. "My lord," he said, "a small matter. Men have begun to whisper that the Master of Laws spends his evenings counting other men's bread. They have begun to say that he is dull." His eyes gleamed, pity and humor making a broth he ladled out to kings and girls without favor. "They say dull like a knife. I thought you would want to be the first to hear it." Ned sat with the pen in his hand and felt, inexplicably, a laugh press below his ribs like a friend who had been absent. Long and knocked quietly at the door and peered in to see if he was welcome. "If I am a dull knife," he said, "it means I am not cutting my own hand." Varys inclined his head. "It means you have not been picked up often enough," he said. "But an unused knife is a fortunate knife. Do you sleep?" "Enough," Ned said, which was the answer he had given men who had asked him that question in the north and the south both. Varys drifted to the window and put his palm on the shutter as if feeling its grain might tell him something. "There will be a trial tomorrow," he said, as if he were telling the weather. "The Queen has found a man who insulted the crown. He says the crown insulted him first by making him swallow things he did not wish to. Such squabbles often end in blood. She asks that you preside." "Then I will preside," Ned said. "And if I can keep the blood from falling into the cup, I will." Varys' mouth turned down at one corner, a frown that was mostly a sigh. "You are building a wall," he said softly. "And each time you set a brick, they will try to knock down two. Be very careful." He finished his letter. He sealed it with the plain seal he had made because the wolf's head from Winterfell could not sit beside the king's hand without weeping. He set it aside for a raven. He stood and found his knee did not protest. He took up the chain and carried it to the bed and set it where his hand could find it. He lay down and closed his eyes and slept without dreaming of the sept or of swords. He dreamed instead of a child's ledger, of columns that held, of numbers that made bridges between one day and the next. Morning began as all mornings did, with light struggling to remember what its business was. He rose and went to the window and watched a gull land on the parapet with the arrogance of something that had discovered it could laugh and be forgiven. The city exhaled. He set his hands to the chain and did not put it on. He felt its weight anyway. He left it on the table when he went out. The gold cloaks blinked. He let them wonder. He walked down to the archive and took the conciliator's book from the shelf and set it on the table and opened it to the place where he had left a scrap of wool from a cloak he no longer wore. He heard, somewhere behind him, the first footsteps of the day's petitioners. He did not yet look up. He smoothed the vellum. The letters looked back at him calmly, black with a patience that would outlast all of them. He began to read. He read quickly at first, to make the words warm under his eye, and then slower, as if the reading itself were a kind of building. He was going to lay a certain number of bricks today. He would lay them one by one, and if the wall did not hold, he would lay it again, wider this time, and with more places to sit. He would keep laying until the boy king learned to walk beside it without trying to kick it down, or until the wall became a road and he could march back north on it and bring his children home. He did not know which it would be. He did not need to know yet. He needed only now to read and then to rise and then to be dull as a knife and as necessary.